Yes, hello everyone, this is Gray from Wakasashi's Tea House over in Japan. How are you doing? I hope you're good and genki. Today we're going to talk comics and comic book movies, and I have a very special guest all the way from the US of A, taking me away from his piggies, his little piglets for a while. It's Pops. How are you doing, Pops?
I'm doing great, my friend. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for having me on again, man. Let's do it. Let's talk some nerd stuff, man.
I'm looking forward to it. We had a great conversation a couple of weeks back, didn't we, about basically modern comics. I've been trying to get Pops into some decent modern comics because, believe it or not, there are some out there, Pops. But what do you think? Are they hard to find these days?
Yeah, so it definitely is a hit and miss, and it's definitely a scale. Like, so you do a couple. I did a Spider-Gwen issue, which not something I can really recommend. Then there was Spider-Man Unforgiven, which is part of, like, I think it's going to be like a mini series that's going to cross over into X-Men and Avengers or Captain America.
Okay.
It has more like potential and stuff. I did a new Predator book that just dropped, but it's like the tricky thing with Predator is you have to come up with a reason or a way to justify for the Predator to have something to hunt. And it's like the best part of the issue is just when the Predator is just splattering blood all over the panels, and you're just that's really the only reason to read a Predator book. This is no exception to that. It's like if you're expecting like good characters or something of depth, you probably shouldn't be reading a Predator book. So yeah, so that's some of the stuff that's been new-ish on top of the stuff
Marvel,
that you had
Pops, isn't it?
recommended.
That's Marvel doing
All
Predator.
three of those were Marvel.
No
Yes,
way.
Predators.
So are they doing mature? Are they doing as a mature title, or is it just is it a clean title?
I didn't look to see if Predator has a mature warning. It has to have a mature warning.
It must have, mustn't it? If
Yeah, I
you
mean,
said like splatter and blood.
Oh, it cuts.
Cool.
I didn't catch the bottom of the page to see if it had a little TV, 13 warning, age 13 warning. I couldn't tell. So
No worries.
yeah,
That's
no,
all right.
there's a lot more of those, the 13 and older kind of thing, so they can have more cursing and blood than they used to. Like when we were growing up, that was like, it was sort of like curtailed a little bit to be, relatively sensitive. Even though we could have extremely adult topics, it was still very, very done in a way, kind of like the way I always likened it to primetime television when we were young. Like stuff that would be on like at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock would be like people sleeping with each other, or you could see the rawness of things, but it was never graphic. And I think that if you'd walked in the room, you were going to be exposed to something your parents didn't want you to see. And that's kind of what we grew up with comics. Like I don't think that a Neil Adams drug use issue was holding back, but it was done in a way that I think that also was not offensive.
That was way ahead of its time, wasn't it? And this is back in the days of the Comics Code Authority. I still remember that little sticker that used to be on the side of the comics, on the front cover, sorry. Yeah, but even back then, with the Comics Code, we got some pretty serious, mature themes, didn't we, in a lot of really good comics. The first thing I think of is the old Daredevil run, not just Frank Miller, but even Ann Nocenti, which that's the one I grew up reading, Pops. And yeah, when you read back some of those issues, there are some really like adult, themes in there.
Agreed.
Okay, cool. I have a couple of actual physical copies I managed to get hold of, Pops. So these are a couple of weeks old. I've already reviewed this, so I got the digital copy, but I got Superman #1. This is the Nick Dragotta cover. I love this cover. So weird.
And you said you really, really liked this relaunch issue.
I did, yeah. I did. Look at this panel here. I think we talked about this before, maybe, but wow. Beautiful. It's got a very animation series style art, the Superman anime, a bit like... But if you like that, it's bright, it's colourful, it's fun, it's intriguing. I think it's setting things up for the future. And one more, which I've talked about before. I don't know if you're getting this, but this is an essential buy. Batman and Joker, Deadly Duo by Mark Silvestri. He's writing and drawing it.
Yeah, the art is just next level stuff. It's really, really great
good,
stuff.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Doesn't come out very well, but yeah, you know what he's like. You know his style. And it's just been a really good Batman story so far. Batman being a detective in Gotham City, not in some crazy multiverse universe, which is what's happening in the main book at the moment. What are your thoughts on Chip's run?
They so lost me when that's what they did. Like they run it. Well, he wasn't vaporized at the end of the failsafe run, because it kind of concludes where you think he's vaporized, right? And you're like, well, obviously that's not what happened. But you're also kind of like, what are you doing? And it's like that issue alone. He wakes up in an alternate universe and how it's all talked about. I'm like, this is like the new 52 Flashpoint type trap all over again. You write
Right.
yourself into a corner and then you just make believe a scenario to get away with just telling some story. And I'm like, I don't have any interest in reading that, Chip. I'm really sorry, man. I really have. And then, of course, and you've talked about this ahead of me, and I was like, I'm even more turned off than you were. The radical change in the art that we had Jorge
Oh,
Jimenez, who was knocking it out of the park. It was like vintage Justice League, classic, iconic looks, and beautiful primary colors. And then suddenly we're back to the pastels. I make all the jokes about the Berkeley art, right? It's all the California art school kids
is that
with
what it is?
pinks, purples, and pastels, babies. It's just it's unbearable. Yeah.
It's so much more noticeable, like you say, isn't it? Because after having Jimenez, he was killing it on the title, beautiful fail-safe run that he did, or he did the art for. But yeah, it's an artist called Mike Hawthorne. I'm not that familiar with him, but I don't like the style, pops. But a lot of people are saying they like it, and it's they're saying it's good. But at one point in the latest issue, I don't know if you've read it yet, he's got Harvey Dent basically hulking out on Venom, much more than Bane ever did when he was on Venom. It's a ridiculous scene. He's absolutely hulking out. It looks crazy. It looks stupid.
Yeah, I will probably go back whenever the story arc ends and maybe just revisit the little story arc as a whole or something maybe, and just like this is because I just need to. I think that we should hold a mirror up to that with what you said with the Silvestri thing and say, listen, this is not good. This is great. And I think Silvestri is a great person to bring in for a run on Batman because he hasn't, touched it recently. Like, so it'd be good to have a fresh take, fresh talent into the most important character in their DC universe. So yeah, cool.
Absolutely. Cool. So, yeah, great to get hold of those. Did you read the Superman at all, issue 1? Did you check it out?
No, it's one of those things where it just every time I go to, I keep getting interrupted. So I'm like, and I like, okay, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna wait until I have time to get through the thing, and physically sit there and read it. So I actually physically got to read Last Ronin, which was the Ninja Turtle one, the famed Ninja Turtle one that was
Oh,
done recently.
how was it?
Oh, it was amazing. I had such a blast. And I wanted a physical copy too, because I knew with that much praise, I knew it was going to be worth it. So someone watched one of my videos and loaned me a copy, physically loaned me a copy. So I had such a great time immersing myself into that experience again, to sit down with just something that I think is going to really, definitely for turtle people, will be talked about forever, because it's just a lot of fun. It really ties together the essence of the old with some new spins on things. And you could even look at it from a woke or modern perspective and be happy with it, because I think of how it directs, but it also doesn't direct in a way that I find is unappealing. I think it makes sense. I was like, okay, that's how it goes. It's not as off-putting because it's not at the detriment of other characters, which is what the flip side of that coin. We don't always talk about the flip side of the coin. It's not about strong women. It's about strong women at the detriment of demeaning men, or at the demeaning of another character. And it did not do that, in my opinion. But we see that in other elements of the entertainment. So yeah.
Speaking of that, I've heard, I don't read it, but I've heard quite a lot of criticism over the last year or so, maybe longer, of the current Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which is being written and drawn by, is it Sophie Campbell? I don't know her that well, but I picked up one issue a while back because the art's pretty good, but people are saying they're not happy with the way she's writing it. That's why I think Last Ronin, was such a breath of fresh air, and people really picked up on that. Fans of the Ninja Turtles went for it.
Oh yeah, and if you haven't seen it, it's probably better because you can really go in fresh, like I did, where I really kind of avoided a lot of it. And when you have like the flashback sequences, and they have that original style of art, that black and white, and the way they were drawn, back it's almost 40 years, man. It's just crazy
Oh,
how
wow.
long ago it's been. Like, because it was 86, I think, right, when Mirage started. So 20. Yeah, we're getting a little long in the tooth, Gray. It's a little hard to handle sometimes when you hear those numbers.
It is. I missed it
Yeah.
as well, Potts, when it was coming out first. I was just getting into comics
hmm
back then, but it
hmm
was like Batman and Spider-Man for me.
Yeah.
Missed
Yeah,
it.
I did not catch. So I mean, I've told the story. I maybe even told it with you. Was the fact that the only way I could get turtle stuff is I had to go across town. There was like 4 or 5 shops that were in the general area where I was in college when this was happening, and it was an expensive store. It was not as it wasn't the one that was as priced friendly for a poor college kid. So it was crosstown, and there was New England comics. So that's where you could get Tick. You could get the New England titles like Tick. I get Paul the Samurai, but they had Ninja Turtles, and they were already on the wall. I had a number 5. I never, it's like these were already on the wall.
No way.
Because there were only so many copies. I think I've read. I don't know how valid these numbers are, but I've read there's only like 3,000 copies of like Ninja Turtles #1.
Wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, that's probably why it was so difficult for me to find it over in the UK. In Manchester, I probably didn't have a chance of finding it.
Yeah, because it would be like trying to find 2000 AD stuff over here. Like it was next to impossible back then.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Interesting. Okay, that sounds cool. So, over the last month or so, would you say the recent new releases, what has stood out for you? What's been any good? What would you recommend to people who may be thinking about picking up something?
I can't just jump on the board with anything that's been new where I'm like, I really, really want to recommend that. I would say that the Spider-Man Unforgiven isn't terrible. The problem is they're bringing in stuff without a lot of explanation of who characters are. So it's characters that were introduced years ago. You don't quite understand who they are, what their powers are. I thought the pacing was a little off. So it's not even something that I can really jump in with both feet and say, yeah, this is one you should grab. A lot of the stuff that I've really highly recommended is the stuff that you and I have already talked about, or you recommended to me, like The King of Spies, which I thought was freaking phenomenal. The Millarverse stuff is just exponentially in its own category right now. I can't wait to get into the next group of those books, those stories. I did reread Hellboy the Crooked Man. Now, Hellboy Crooked Man has been around a while. I think it's 2008 or 9.
Yeah, I have a copy on digital somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're adapting that for the next film. They're doing a reboot. So I have a video
that
will drop on. Yeah, I did a video on Monday. It'll drop on Monday of kind of catching everybody up on the latest casting news and who's going to play who.
No way.
talked about the comic a little bit, and I love the comic. I think it's a great story. I don't see it adapting particularly great to film because there's really not a lot of action. There's only like really 2 kind of action sequences. It's more like it's a witch story. So it's not really the thing that's going to showcase Hellboy, which is what everyone wants to show up and see. Like they want to see Hellboy kicking butt. They want to see Hellboy, kicking butt and cracking jokes. And that story is not a story that showcases that part of the Hellboy mythos. That's the more deeper grounded, it's set years ago. It's like decades ago. So it's not like it's something that's set in modern times. So that was probably one of the best things that I've read in like the last week. But again, that's an older book. It's not a new book.
Is that Pops? Is that a single issue story or is it the 2 issue? Oh, 3. Okay, it's 3 issues. Is that one of the ones that Richard Corbin illustrated?
Yes, actually. Yep.
He's got a very unique style, hasn't he? Yeah,
very much. Okay. So, yeah. The Crooked Man himself has such a strange design. I'm fascinated in how they want to bring that to life. Like it really, really is interesting. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm currently working on a review of the brand new issue of, are you ready for it? Amazing Spider-Man. It's issue 21. It's it dropped yesterday. It's the one where they're going to start the story arc. Listen, this is issue 21, yeah? They're going to finally tell you what the mystery was from issue 1. 20 issues later. And guess what?
I told you, it's one of the reasons I bailed out. I don't even want to know. Don't even tell me.
They don't tell you. You got to wait. It's going to take at least 4 or 5 issues before they do. They're going to build up to it, aren't they, again? Because of course they are.
So for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, there was some positive hype about Amazing Spider-Man. So I thought, I'll give it a run. And I start reading, and I was like, okay, I'm just not seeing what everyone else is seeing. I'm seeing John Romita Jr. take panels off. And by panels off, I mean the art is good, and then all of a sudden you have some panel where you're like, what happened here in this? I feel like it's something that someone photoshopped something in, or they modified something, or it just doesn't look right. And then there's constant references to Spider-Man. And, in this situation, he was not married to MJ. MJ has kids. Things have happened. It's real dark. And it's like everyone talks about it. Black Cat's talked about it. And you're like, I have no idea what they're talking about. There's no editor notes. Like, I don't understand. And I have to be honest, there are two things that I notice in modern comics, Gray, and I want you to either you agree or don't, but once you see it, I don't think you'll be able to unsee it. There's a lack of editor notes. They will refer to things and you have no idea what they're talking about. Now,
Right.
I might know because I've read the book, but for instance, I think it's one of the more recent reviews I did. It's like here they did an editor note, but here they didn't do an editor note. So they're talking about something that happened, but they don't tell you where it's from. And then two, every book, no matter how good or bad it is, they all have to have a cringe panel. There has to be a panel that has something where you're like, what is happening and why did we do this? It has to be the way the art is drawn. It has to be an expression by a character. It has to be maybe a woke moment or something that's so 2023, like so it will not age well kind of moment. There has to be at least one cringe panel per book in Marvel right now, for sure. So that's my theory, at least for now, until proven otherwise.
Well, here's the cover, just to give you an idea.
Mm-hmm.
This is it, the story arc you've been waiting for, and it's supposed to
almost 2 years.
Yeah, it's going to climax with 25. So I already called it. I said they're not going to tell you what happened in this. It'll be 21, 22, 23, 4 or 5 issues before they do. Mm-hmm. But I say no spoilers here, Pops, because I'm still doing the review, but they've basically, I think they're bringing back some very minor villain who I've never heard of, but I've been out of the series for a long time. And it's kind of like, it references 2 different issues. One is in the 890s, and I think the other one was like 500 and something. It's like, oh yeah, we all remember that, don't we? You know, issue 555 or whatever, I'm guessing here. It's something like that.
Wow.
God.
So I think they've just misconstrued the idea of what when we talk about nostalgia and callbacks and the comics that we want. They keep doing these moments where they go back to something that's old, but they don't quite get it. So, like for instance, we gave a lot of praise to the Chip Zdarsky run on Batman, like we talked about, because we felt as though it was an extension in a lot of ways of what started all the way back to Grant Morrison and the Tower of Babel story and the Justice League. And, you know, Batman had to have a contingency plan for all the other heroes. Well, guess what? He had a contingency plan for himself, and he had this nice art. But then they can't just stop it. They have to just mess it up. They can't build within the universe. And I think that's it too. It's like, I don't know what the plan is. Do they have a plan? Because sometimes I don't think they have a plan. They're just literally going story arc to story arc. There's no plan over the course of a whole year, 2 years, 5 years. I don't know what they're doing. I really don't feel like they have one.
I was just checking. I've muted then because I'm checking a few photos and what happens with StreamYard, Pops. I'm sure you get it a lot. You kind of robot sometimes. I do. I've just found the reference. Listen to this. It says, do you remember Amazing Spider-Man issues 555 to 557? That's all it says, the editor's note.
Wow.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
Well, especially because I don't feel like the comics have usually the ability to give me enough information that I can still enjoy where I'm at now. You know what I mean? It's to say, you know, this is something that, you know, back when I first, you know, saw this guy or whatever, interacted with this character or whatever. It's this is a 2008 issue written by Zeb Wells. So he's borrowing from himself, something that he wrote in 2008.
Oh, okay, thanks. I didn't know that. I didn't even know he was writing it back then. No way.
Yeah, well, I can't even keep track because Spider-Man changed hands so much. It was one of the gimmick comic books with Wolverine on the cover. Cool cover look. It's a cool look, but it's obviously the gimmick.
Was that during the Dan Slott? Was it 10-year run? He was on it for 10 years, wasn't he, or something?
Yeah, something like that. I don't know if this was like an off issue or something like that. He introduced a character called Dr. Benjamin Rabin.
The name Rabin or Rabin, yeah, I don't know how to pronounce it. I was saying Rabin. That comes up because we were kind of joking, saying it sounds like Robin. You know, Rabin. Mm-hmm. Is Robin in this? Oh God.
Right.
Oh, Bobs.
Yes,
what
and
is
then of course, okay, so yeah, that's the callback. The callback is to this character that Zeb Wells co-created in 2008.
Ah, interesting.
So I assume that's the big bad. So behind it all was a character. It dates back to 2008. It dates back to the Obama administration, Gray. Aren't we happy about that? All right, fair enough.
You know, of course, I wasn't reading it back then. I'm sure there are a lot of very loyal Spider-Man fans. I'm sure people will know, who this character is, but I don't think it's a major character. And it still doesn't answer the question, what did Peter do something terrible? It's like, no, they just reintroduced this villain, but you don't know anything about him, and it's like cliffhanger, and that's it. The issue, nothing really happens. It just sets it up. And guess what, Pops? In this issue, they waste 2 pages, a double-page spread. It's all black, and it just says 1 year earlier in big letters. 2 pages to say that. Wait till you see my review. I'm a little bit sarcastic, shall we say, for once. A little bit ranty.
So if you guys can imagine the scales, because there's like, here's the way comic books are in our little circle of circles. There's Gray, who's usually so sweet and kind, even when he's being like really, when he hates on something. And then there's me, who like face palms and just like, I can't believe this. I don't understand. And then there's other people that get worse than me. And then there's Az, who will be like, this is effing blah, 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 blah. So there's a scale of how things are dealt with. So, yeah.
I do focus on positives, you're right. And to be fair, I do rig the competition parts, because I usually only review things that I really enjoy. I'm reading King Spawn, as you know, we talked about that. King Spawn, Gunslinger Spawn, some of the Mark Miller new comics like Nemesis Reloaded is fantastic. He's also doing Magic Order, which I like. So yeah, but every now and then I've got to drop a Spider-Man, because they do get a lot of interest. They do quite well for me. I'm talking like a couple of 100 views, which for me is great. And there's a lot of good debate about it. But I tell you, so many long-term fans have had enough, Pops. They're out. They say, okay, I'm out until Zeb Wells is replaced. But we don't think it's going to happen. And we don't even know if it's down to him. There are lots of rumours it's coming from above. It's coming from Nick Lowe, the editor or assistant editor. He's like controlling it.
The editing on this book is terrible. The editing on that book is terrible. I mean, people might like it, but Amazing Spider-Man #1, if you want to pull that up just really quickly, the fact that this cover gets through and no one in the room thought to themselves, we might have a design element, John. I mean, John is an icon, and I respect John Romita Jr. I've loved a lot of what he's doing, and I think even in this run, when he's doing action, it's top notch. There's great panels of Peter and Spider-Man in the streets, and when Spidey's flipping and swinging through the streets and jumping off cars and all of that, when he's fighting, Tombstone, right? Yeah. So it's just, there's just awesome stuff. But when this first issue dropped and the cover went out there and the placement of the hand created like instant meme stuff on Twitter and such, it was like, oh yeah, that shouldn't have gotten through. Like, I know you didn't mean that to look the way it looks, but yeah, that didn't go well. So yeah, I'm just saying, this really was just like, oh, okay. They didn't make those kind of mistakes back in the day unless it was on purpose, Gray.
Really? Do you think I didn't even notice this? I just thought people were saying he looked a bit. He's contorted. His body was a bit strange, and the angle was a bit weird. But
definitely is. And then it is also the fact that that may not be the best design. Yeah,
can't quite see it. Can you? Well,
not on that shot. Yeah, it's a. Yeah, folks, Spider-Man. I mean, for like 2 days, it was like memeing all over Twitter and stuff like that for like 2 days. People just circle it like, hey, Marvel, what okay. So.
Is this like accidental? No, I don't think so.
I don't know.
I don't know. They missed it, because I did. I completely missed it. I didn't even pay that much attention.
I don't think John Romita Jr. is malicious. I don't think he's a crazy wokester or anything like that. I think it's just something that they did, and this is just how it was. And then no one in the room went, hey, listen, can we make a little 10-degree adjustment? Can we do this? Something like that, because it kind of looks like this. And you know what? Some of this stuff is unintentional. Fine. But it shouldn't have gotten through.
I know, at least you got me. You got me laughing, Pops. You cheer me up, thanks, because I was on a bit of a downer after working on that review. Jesus.
Oh yeah. Well, you know what? You do it and you move on, my friend. It was like I said, Spider Gwen which Spider Gwen, it doesn't. She's Gwen, Spider Gwen, and then Ghost Spider, and again, the first page is all pink and purple. It's insane. I'm like, what? You got what? Oh, no, come on. And it was like, okay. And I will just say that there's a thing with the new comics that I find where most of the time, I don't feel like I'm reading about people that could be real. Like they're just not real humans to me. Like I don't think the characters have a voice and a realism about them that we got when we were reading comics. So for us in particular, we talk a lot about Batman and Daredevil, and it's like, I mean, I even did the comic talk with Shelby Loves, and it was part about like each character in Daredevil had a voice and a cadence. They had certain words they would use or not use that was similar to what, I mean, Batman was like that for like, 20 years of our life, where it's like Batman was so perfectly done. You're like, you knew exactly. That's why there's so much pushback to like the Tim Drake thing and things like that. It's like, you can't just radically change. It's a person. It's not just a drawing. There's a character with how they've talked, how they've thought, how they've done different things. And it was done so well for so long. Modern comics, it doesn't seem like a lot of that is behind the scenes being done. I don't feel like the Peter is my Peter.
No.
I don't know that I believe he's real. Yeah.
They've lost it. They've lost as you say, the character's voice. Do you find this a lot with this is not all. It's not a blanket statement. It's not all modern writers, but Pops, I find a lot of them, it's them. You hear the writer's voice. You don't hear Tim Drake or, Peter Parker or Mary Jane. You're hearing the writer's voice, and you shouldn't hear that. You're hearing their Twitter feed, or, their almost like their blog or something, and it just takes you right out of it. Going back to that Tim Drake, the new one, the controversial one, and this is not because they've suddenly decided to make him bisexual. It's the writer for that, Megan Fitzmartin, I think one of the worst writers, who unbelievably gets more and more work at the moment. She doesn't understand the fundamental part of Tim Drake Robin. He wanted to be Robin, not Batman. He wanted to be Robin. That's what's important about him. He said that before, but she's got him saying, oh, I've always wanted to be Batman in one of her issues. It's like, you've no idea.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So there's two camps. There's probably more than two camps. There's two main camps of what we're talking about, and that would be the one, like you said, they sound like self-inserts. Their social media pages, their social media presence is a self-insert into the dialogue they're writing. The bigger problem with the issues that I was just referring to, like the Spider-Gwen issue, or maybe even the recent Spider-Man issue, and even the Predator issue to a lesser extent, because of the three of them, Predator probably is the better issue. It's just mindless Predator stuff happening. The characters feel very cardboard and fake, like especially Spider-Gwen. Like it's clear this person has somehow thought they knew how the young girl would talk, but not been around young girls. Like I have daughters. So my youngest daughter is, going to be 21. So when you're around young women and you can see how they talk and how they move, and you can understand the dialogue of how they would write and how they would talk, so you know how to write them. I feel so much of this is just like how someone thinks someone else talks, not how they talk. And that's fine, but there should be a consistency of the character. The character has been around. This isn't a brand new character. So you should be maintaining what has gone before you with how the character talks, the language that they use, the vocabulary that they use. And as you say, the Tim Drake example is a perfect one. Tim Drake has never talked about wanting to be Batman ever. It was never on his to-do list. And it's silly for you to think that's wrong. Like I don't understand why you can't envision this character who sees Batman, grows up with Batman, has been around Batman for the equivalent of 30 issues of comic book lore, 30 years of comic book lore.
Yeah.
Then he gets, I'm good being Robin. I don't want to be that guy. And then now it's like suddenly we're making radical changes of his life with his sexuality, his identity, all of these different things without really any explanation or pause. And this dates back now. We're looking at like almost a year of this where they're radically, and I think maybe it's because people have pushed back against the Tim Drake change because we like the issues where he's not behaving this way. So for instance, in the earlier part of the Batman series we were talking about, Tim Drake is in many of those issues, and he's just behaving like Tim Drake. He's not behaving erratically. His vocabulary, his behavior, all those things are not, it's not off-putting or strange. It has nothing about him being gay. It's about the fact that it all changed on a dime. There are no remnants, there are no breadcrumbs in any issues of him having questions, being drawn towards men, making comments or thought bubbles that thought, oh, by the way, and this is a character that had his own series. I mean, how many issues? It's like, what on earth? And it's just the latest example. Of course, there are dozens of these examples across these two companies, and probably all the companies, but these two in particular, because they were around the longest.
That's it. Yeah, and you're right. It's the fact that they didn't even explore it. There was no, like you say, no lead up, nothing. It's just like, okay, bang, change, accept it. Oh, you don't accept it? Okay, you're blah, 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 and that's it. And also, Pops, it's like, do they think that's the majority of the audience? Do they think they're appealing to the majority of comic book buyers? Come on. Come on. They must know their audience.
And I took the heat. I'll take the heat. I don't care. I'm a very close friend. And I didn't really run this by him. And I thought, well, I'm not be offending him. But I said, this is like a gimmick. You can't treat sexuality as a gimmick. You can't write this stuff in there and make it seem as though this is like a normal thing that, oh yeah, he's been dating women, all this stuff's been happening, all these things have been going on. Then okay, well today he meets Bernard and now he's gay. And you're like, what? Like you're treating it as a gimmick to sell a comic book. And that's really, really not an acceptable thing that we would do, and that's another reason why people don't relate to it. It's like, this isn't right. Like it just doesn't, nothing about this is real. It's all fabricated nonsense.
Yeah, you're right. It's crazy, isn't it? But we get criticized for calling it out. But anyway, we'll see how long that Tim Drake Robin book, lasts.
I don't know.
I can't believe it's made it to 6.
Why? Where is this Marvel North Star miniseries? He's the OG gay dude that came out when we were young. I didn't know that North Star had gotten his own miniseries or anything that I'm aware of. Like, is he rocking and rolling the sales charts? Why has he not been a key integral part of the X-Men the whole time? Like, they're such hypocrites and liars and frauds with how they handle all this, that this is why the Eric July thing has taken off so much, because he hit the nail on the head each time he's dissected some of these different things. And it's almost become laughable at this point.
It's lazy. End of the day as well, it's lazy because, as you say, they can't create an original character, or they can't use, maybe a very minor character like you just mentioned. They've got to change a very famous big character because, that's just so easy, isn't it? It's just the easy way. There's no thought, and it means they don't even mean it. They don't mean it, do they, Pops? They're prepared to do that.
Like I said, it's a gimmick. It's a gimmick
to sell comics, and look how long.
Or
it lasted.
Self-insert, right? It's a self-insert.
Oh God.
Yeah, the self-insert is the other thing, especially like in the X universe and things like that. You're like, oh boy, you guys really have some issues and things like that are going on with you guys. God. And I think this is my hang up with like the Velma TV show that got people kind of bent out of shape. Was right. I lasted one episode, and I said, listen, something is really wrong with you if you want to see yourself in Scooby-Doo to the point where you want to literally cosplay as Velma, race and gender swap other characters, radically change them, change their sexuality, and then just mock the white dude. Like, you literally have problems. This is a 1970s children's cartoon. You have issues. Don't try to put this on me because I don't like it. You're the one with the issue. I'm not going around looking at cartoons and trying to figure out how to self-insert myself in there. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Isn't it? Yes, we're in bizarro world, aren't we?
It's a strange, like almost like fetish thing. Like I'm not having, self-inserting myself as George Jetson and thinking we should reboot this so I can see a shower scene with the girl. I'm like, I don't know. Something is wrong if you're doing those things. And we've gotten to that place where some of this stuff has gotten through. And I think that they don't have a problem fan baiting. We're seeing this with the Ninja Turtle and the April O'Neil thing. I talked about it last night with Sporking News, that, we turned her into a black fat woman. So now there's all this fan hating and all this stuff's going crazy. You have YouTubers fight with YouTubers. I'm like, but all of that still gets people to watch at least the one episode. Yeah. And I think they know it stinks. And, I don't know how it gets through, though. I don't know how it keeps getting made. But this fan baiting, hate baiting stuff does work.
controversy. It's great PR, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, it sells comics, it sells streaming services, it gets people to watch, it gets people talking about it. But do you not think it's almost become like a meme now? This whole thing, it's become so ridiculous. I think they're almost doing it to, you could almost see them trolling the fans. It's like, okay, well, you know, who can we do next? Who can we change next? Just to like piss everybody off.
I wouldn't even be surprised if they did it themselves, that they had their own PR people make memes and fake accounts or use accounts to post things to promote and start the ball rolling, fuel the fire, fuel the flames. Because, like, you know, the old saying, right? You know, all publicity is good for business, right? So it doesn't matter if people are hating on you. You know, here we had a president who basically, that's how he approached things. He didn't really care if you were loving and praising him or hating and bashing him, as long as you were talking about him. That's all that actually mattered, right? And that has bled over into social media, because as long as you're part of the conversation, until you really get your feelings hurt, you don't care how you're being talked about. So until you get your feelings hurt, you don't care, as long as you're being buzzed and you're trending and you're whatever. And I think that's how so much of this stuff is being driven. As long as they end up trending and they're making money and attention for the company doesn't care. The company cares. Do you think that company cares at all about the Ninja Turtles, of what damage it could do, or how many people would less read Ninja Turtles if it means this is what the ratings will be, this is what the sales will be? They'll worry about tomorrow when they get there. They do not have any of that. Like we talked about, they don't have a plan. I do not have it. I have very little belief and faith that these people have plans. And we're going to get to comic book movies, and this is exactly how I feel about all of that, because I just don't feel like we have plans.
To quote a very classic movie, which I'm sure you've seen and you love as well, the plan is, there is no plan. John Belushi, Blues Brothers. Yeah, it's crazy, Pops. And one last note on that, I still can't believe Seth Rogen is doing that new Ninja Turtles series. How? Anyway,
well, Santa Incorporated went so well. We're going to let this guy be attached.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, I just
insane.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. That's a really good talk on comics, and yeah, that kind of went its own way. But before we finish, I want to